Yep, that's us now live.
Okay, thank you. Right, so good afternoon, everyone, and I'll open the hearing. I intend to go through Mr. Godfrey's objections to orders 1, 2, and 3 in his absence. Many of the environmental issues he's referred to in his objections, such as the effect on trees and woodland, traffic noise, the effect on the footpath network during the construction period, we discussed in detail yesterday in relation to his objection to order number 4. And that includes the advertisement and publicity for the orders. So I've got all his complete statements and council's responses, response to the original objection. What I want to do, I'll read out his initial objection in each case, the relevant conclusions taken from his later statements, and refer to any additional matters he's raised. I don't think I need to go through the full of the statement, so I think the conclusions is summarise what he said, and I can't add anything extra that I need to ask about. So I'll start with Perth and Kinross Council, core path Lunc RT2 and right of way 36/2, stopping up and diversion number 1 order 2021. My understanding that this involves a very short diversion to take the path around the proposed West Bridge Pier. In his initial objection, Mr. Godfrey stated that the bridge crossing of the River Tay has been chosen over one of its most scenic views. The drawing on the council's website demonstrates the path diversion would be close to the unattractive West Pier that would prohibit a clear view over the river. The bridge would be over the diversion or close to it, or close above it, sorry. Other detractions will be an increase in noise from traffic using the crossing and exhaust emissions from their vehicles. The drawing is little more than a poor sketch with no specification on the width of the diversion or materials to be used in the diversion. The attractiveness of this section of the core path would be lost, hardly an improvement. It's his comment. His conclusion from his later statement was as follows. I maintain the objections I set out in my letter of the 16th of June 2021 to the Head of Legal and Governance Services of the Council. I also object to the absence of information on how safety of the public will be met during the construction period and how access will be gained along the full length required to reach the West Pier location. There will be lasting impacts from the West Pier location on views from the core path and the use of it. Stopping up and diversion are not necessary because the location for the West Pier has not been thought out properly. As a result, the order should be dismissed. And then another matter he raised in his statement was he queried whether the ground conditions would enable a suitable foundation for the West Pier. So turning to the council, would you like to pick up on some of those points, that maybe ones that we haven't covered previously, but certainly he's got concerns over views and proximity to the proposed West Pier.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think I can say a little bit, and then I think Denise and Becky could probably come in as well, but I don't think it's, I certainly don't agree with the fact that the statement, Mr. Godfrey's statement states that there's not been thought out for the location of the West Pier, because, I mean, that's indicating that the location of the bridge and the alignments have not been thought out properly, and that's all been subject to the necessary stag appraisals and all the different appraisals that need to happen throughout the process for deciding the final route of the road. So the council's followed due process in that regard, and consulted with all the necessary statutory consultees, and in fact we ended up with a plan application that didn't have an objection from any statutory consultee, which says something given there is a lot of environmental sensitivities in the area, and it shows you how far we went in our discussions with the statutory consultees to keep them all happy. There's extensive meetings with the likes of Historic Environment Scotland, Nature Scot, SEPA, and they were all happy in the end that this was the best fit alignment for the CGLR through this landscape. So I don't think you can say that it wasn't thought through. With regards to the suitability of the riverbank as a foundation for the bridge structure, I think that's a moot point, because we're not using the riverbank as the foundation for the bridge structure. The bridge structure will be on a piled foundation that will be piled down to rock. So his points on that are quite irrelevant with regards to the engineering, the engineering design, if you like. Some 40, 50 metres below the rock is, and that's how deep the piles will go. But that's probably kind of a higher level. I'm sure Becky and Denise could perhaps go into probably more detail if you thought that was necessary.
Thank you.
I think the just to support, I suppose, Ross's point about the amount of work that's gone into it, with the number of environmental considerations in this area, we carried out a lot of consultation with Nature.Scot and Historic Environment Scotland. The River Tay, as I'm sure you'll be aware, is an designated SEC, and Nature.Scot were very clear from the start of our consultation with them that they would not accept any built structure into the river because of the impact that it could have upon that designation. So the engineering design has very much, I suppose, respected those environmental constraints, which is why, as Ross was explaining, why the pier is where it is and it's not in the riverbed itself. And part of the overall design was also keeping the structure as low as possible, so that there was as little impact as possible from a landscape perspective, which Nature.Scot were responsible for commenting on, but also the designed garden and historic landscape that surrounds Scone Palace, which Historic Environment Scotland have a heavy interest in as well. So I think that the entire scheme design has had to take into account quite a lot of significant environmental considerations, and has had to weigh up maybe impacts upon one set of receptors over reducing impact upon others. And I think the view was that by keeping the pier on the riverbank and ensuring that the river was kept clear, there was a very small diversion required to a core path. But compared to the impacts that could have upon a European protected river or the national designated garden design landscape, that was fairly minimal in terms of weighing those up.
Thank you.
I could just come in again and support what Ross and Becky have said, maybe a bit more on focusing on the bridge arrangement that we ended up with. So the bridge design as we have it is a kind of optimum balance between the river environment, the need to protect the river channel, as Becky said, cost and the aesthetics of the bridge. So the span arrangement that we have, which dictates the position of the piers, including the west pier, that necessitates the diversion of the Lunc is dictated by the sort of structural properties as well as these factors. So if we had to, for example, increase the span to take it away from take the west pier out with the path, it would have quite significant cost implications for the structure. So we'd have to have it would remove it from being a sort of optimal design. Therefore, we'd have to have more materials within the structure, which would push the cost up. It's likely to affect the sort of curvature we have of the span as well, and the aesthetics of it, which Becky's touched on. And that's really the reason that we have it as it's proposed.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I don't think Mr. Gutt seems to talk more about the bridge pier than actually where you want the path to go. But I think that what you said sort of covers the points he's raised for me. So along with that, I can read through all the documentation.
There was one other point I noted down that I'm hoping somebody can answer. Are we able to say anything at this stage about the specification of that path? I think it was his first point. You know, he wasn't clear what the spec of the path was, where it diverts around the pier. Are we able to say anything at this stage?
Would you like to answer that from council's point of view?
Yeah, I mean, Denise could probably find the actual, more detailed specification, but in general, it's in keeping with the track that's either side of the diversion. So you want to provide continuity. So we're just providing a track that's in keeping with regards to width and surface. So it's an unbound surface, I can't recall the exact depths of the unbound material, and that we need to look up the scope, but it's generally for consistency. So the track operates as a core path, but also for access for the local fishing beat. So you've got to get a kind of off-road vehicle up and down at certain times. I think very rarely that happens, but generally the paths a kind of width and surface that allow for that.
Yeah,
That would match what's there just now. That's great.
Yep.
thanks. Yeah, I mean, in terms of views, where the trees have been removed, there is a clear view of the river, but I sort of noted on my walk there that there is a lot of tree cover which sort of masks the river in places anyway. So it's sort of been opened up, but will be closed again to move by the bridge. That's a sort of consequential of the development, I suppose. Yeah, looking through, I think you covered all the points for me on that one. So happy to proceed on to look at the next order. It's okay. Unless there's anything else from you, Mr. From Colin on this?
No, but if we have a little wash up at the very end, there is a point I'd like to make, but it's about all orders, not about this order. So
yeah,
we can do that at just any other point at the end.
That's fine, yeah. Right. So turn to the next order, which is the Perth and Kinross Council Core Path Lunc 102, stopping up and diversion number 2, order 2021. This involves a fairly long section of core path, which I understand is close to the existing route of the A9. And Mr. Godfrey stated initially in his objection, there's no explanation how the move from the existing route to the diverted route during its construction will be achieved to allow public access to continue unhindered. There are peculiar bends and curves on the diversion that appear unnecessary. There does not appear to be any justification for bringing the diversion nearer the railway line. This would appear to require the removal of trees, including ancient oaks that line the old Perth to Inverness Road, as it was referred to. The project so far has resulted in huge woodland destruction, and further loss should be avoided, as would be consistent with Scottish Planning Policy 2020, Policy Principles 194 and Woodland 2016. There's no specification for the type, width and type of materials to be used in the construction of the diversion. Then his conclusion to his statement was as follows. I sustain my objection to the order because stopping up and diverting Lunc 102 will be detrimental to its users as described. The question arises, in these circumstances, can such an order be competent? Council does not make clear arrangements for Lunc 102 during the construction period. The scale of current site clearance by the contractor on Lunc 102 is not dissimilar to construction period operations. The joint cross-tailing road newsletter by the parties on the Perth Transport Futures website is intimating earthworks starting in May 2022. Results so far leave little room for confidence into what's being provided and what should be provided. In case the stopping up and diverting has not been made, the order fails accordingly and should be dismissed. Additional points he raised in his statement include that he considers maintaining the core path on his current route would be preferable for health reasons and enjoyment of the route, and that a new grade separated junction as a route to Perth for active travel and journeys on foot will be at a disadvantage involving increased distances. He also comments that the stated net gain in woodland is beyond credibility. So somebody like to comment on generally on the route of the diversion and the bends and curves it's referred to and why they're in place. So help us start to come on.
Again, I could probably say something a bit more high level, and then Becky and Denise maybe come in with a bit more detail if you want on the design. I think this goes back to a point we made earlier on in the hearings, maybe the first day of the hearings. We were talking about Lunc 124, and we were talking about previously in years gone by. Maybe it would have been the kind of Scottish office at the time, or the Roads Authority at the time would come along and build a new trunk road and leave old sections of previous road, and they would just leave them as they were previously, and it actually caused a lot of problems for local authorities, misuse of these areas, and they were a bit untidy, unsightly. So we really don't want to do that. So we're moving the A9 over, 150, 160 metres at the most, and we could potentially leave this dual carriageway corridor in place and not do anything with it. But that's far from what we want to do, and we've got an extensive landscaping scheme that's going to fill in this corridor. So the undulations and the various kind of weaving of the path through that is simply that. It's we're really re-landscaping this corridor, so it's not following the existing line, because the existing line won't be there anymore, because we're taking the opportunity to provide an area of high amenity. We feel that leaving it in the existing corridor and leaving the existing dual carriageway alignment in place would be to the detriment of the scheme, to the detriment of users, and to the detriment of the local environment. The other maybe more important aspect of it is that there's going to be an embankment in the way, so the path can't go through the embankment, because the approach embankment for the bridge is in there, so the path has to deviate at the very least around that embankment. So the path does deviate around that embankment, and that's where it intimates that it's getting closer to the railway boundary, and that's the location it does get closer to the railway boundary, because it has to go round in front of the western abutment for the day crossing. So that's a kind of general ethos to the requirement for the path diversion. With regards to temporary provision, I know that's another thing that he's raised. Mr. Godfrey raised that in all of his objections, really. But the answer to that's the same as the previous answers. We're currently looking into that, and temporary access is being discussed with Dave's team within the council at the moment, and then it will be communicated locally with the local access forum and local community groups, and access will be maintained as much as possible throughout the works. And we're working on that closely with the contractor at the moment. But yeah, I think maybe Becky and maybe Denise maybe want to come in a bit more detail on the kind of landscape and design and the route through there.
Yeah, thanks.
I think from a project design perspective, we actually see this as one of the kind of key benefits, I suppose, because you are going to be able to take this path slightly away from the A9. So things like air quality and noise levels will reduce. With the landscaping proposed, gives opportunities for reconnecting green and blue infrastructure together, but just more generally providing enhancement for biodiversity, but then also a nicer place for people to walk, to cycle, to access. The park and ride provision is provision is in this kind of area as well, and part of the reason of putting that in place was to try and provide people that may have limited accessibility to also be able to access these paths and be able to get down to that riverfront, whereas just now they would have to have a certain level of mobility to be able to get anywhere close to that area. So I think the design has tried where possible to create a really nice area along this path. And from looking at the plans prepared, the slight changes are not significant in terms of where the actual path or the new proposed path will be. It's a fairly minor move, and actually very close to the existing one as well.
Yeah, but where it does quite the main sort of bend, does that go around the proposed pond or lake area?
I think that one of the things, I think from when I was reading Mr. Godfrey's response, when he was talking about the link up to the grade separated junction, which is where there's a bit of that bend, I think he seemed to think that was replacing Lunc 102, but that actually is in addition to the existing Lunc 102. It's providing that additional access onto the new road infrastructure. I think that's the area that you're meaning as well, where there is a slight bend. I think the cycle and park and cycle position is quite close to there, isn't it, Ross?
Yeah, I think it's a wee bit further south. I think I'm just pulling the plan up in front of me at my end just now, just so I can get in the same page when you're talking about bends. But I think in general it's quite difficult because the order plan just shows the actual core path order, if you like. Yeah. You really need to look at like the landscaping plans or the wider scheme of plans to get context. So again, it's similar to discussions we were having on Tuesday, I think it was. It's getting that kind of context and looking at it in relation to other plans, because as we agreed with Colin, with kind of discussions, as Colin alluded to yesterday, I think it was, about discussions over what to include and what not to include in the plans. So we tried to keep the plans as simple as possible. So maybe Mr. Godfrey's been struggling to understand the plans in isolation, if you like, and it's maybe something you're better looking at along with the wider kind of landscaping plans. I think that's maybe what's causing the confusion.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. Yeah, on that. In terms of
I was just going to add there in terms of the bends that he's talking about. I don't know whether he's talking about some of the curvature that we've introduced to the path, which is deliberate, that we've tried to make it flow through the corridor, as Becky was saying, a sort of creating a blue-green corridor through there and snaking as much as possible the route through. Significant length of it is a shared surface with the access up to Denmark Field. So the standards have been sort of followed, but flexibility within them used to try and make that less of an engineered route, just straight up the old carriageway and more flowing in its alignment.
Yeah. His comment about the amount of woodland that
Mentioned the oak trees, didn't he? Mention some ancient oaks. Anyone put tree protection?
I think there's an outline point to be made, first of all, and I've said it before, that the path order itself, which is what we're concentrating on, doesn't fell the trees. That's the wider project, but I'm sure someone will be able to answer that question better than I did latterly produce the clearance plans, so you get an idea of what is getting cleared. I think that's towards the very end. I think it's PKC 35. Just for information, the park and cycle is on PKC 34 document.
Right. Okay. Yeah. There was the sort of overall sort of picture of though, would there be a net gain in woodland? I appreciate that might not include the loss of Bertha Park, because that seems to be a separate issue.
Well, it does includes it includes the area of Bertha Park that the CTL are required to take away. So there is a net gain in woodland. I think in the background, perhaps Becky and Denise could look at the exact numbers in hectares, but it's something in the region of 11 hectares lost and 13 hectares put back from memory.
It's actually 13.5 put back and 12.2 lost, Ross. That doesn't include the landscaping proposals. There is woodland planting within the landscape proposals themselves as part of the scheme.
Yeah, so that'll be over and above the compensating planting packages. So there's a vast kind of positive impact with regards to tree planting, albeit we acknowledge there is loss of established woodland and some of it's ancient woodland, but it's all been fully consulted on and agreed with Nature Scott, Forestry Commission, and all the other, PKC biodiversity colleagues, etc.
And the other point would be none of them are subject to TPOs.
No trees subject to any protection orders within the whole scheme.
I think it's worth also adding that I know there was points raised about just general biodiversity and different species and the breadth of species in this local area. There's also a significant amount of hedgerows being put back in as well. So it's not, we haven't just focused on trees, that we are restoring and maintaining and replacing hedgerows on that back to that green corridor perspective of connecting other green areas up and trying to put those back in. I can't remember the numbers offhand, Denise, but I can remember it was fairly significant.
Kilometres of hedge that we're planting.
Can I just answer a narrow point that Mr. Godfrey makes? He's saying the section of this path is close to the railway. I think there's 11 trains a day in each direction on the railway. So I think that we're further from the new road. We may be closer to the railway, but there's not significant traffic along that railway in the same way as there is along the car traffic along the road. And the other thing, thinking about this as a landscape corridor to carry the diverted path, I don't know how far you explored when you were in Perth, but that links very well with the very high quality path links into the city centre, because you continue along the Armand through the golf course into the North Inch, you come right into the city centre on quite a high quality path. So keen to have that flow, that landscape flow coming in from down Lunc into the city centre itself.
Thank you.
And we're also, it's probably worth noting, we are also there's links that are currently being explored between this and the other schemes. I know I kind of tried to stress yesterday about the bigger picture for Perth Transport Futures, and phase 4 of Perth Transport Futures is the last phase once we get the traffic out the city centre, looking at these moves towards greener modes of travel, and the Lunc Road corridor is getting looked at just now, and there is discussions obviously about tying up, because like Dave said, this links in with a path into the North Inch, but it can also has potentially link in with the Dunkeld Road corridor once that's made more cycle friendly as well. So there's all that kind of joined up thinking ongoing, which sometimes the council's not so good at publicising its vision, the joined up thinking, and but nonetheless it definitely does happen. It's, I think, a very good practice at the moment.
Okay. Mr. Elliott, have you got anything to add at all from?
Just for clarity on the stopping up element, just to be clear, coming back to the order itself.
Yeah.
Most of the stopping up relates to the realignment and the kind of the different gradients, etc. But just to be clear, there are 2 points I think I'm correct in saying where the path has to move due to physical changes, obstructions, if you like. And that is been referred to already that you've got the east roundabout and then you've got the road and the bridge going across the Tay. And that's the point at which the path physically cannot stay in the same bit because it will hit into the abutment of the bridge.
Yeah.
So therefore it has to move closer to the railway. My understanding also, it's not quite been fully mentioned, but the other part is away down the bottom of the order is where there's going to be a suds pond, and there's a small change there as well when it comes back to the original point. But so it's there are physical obstructions and, if you like, absolute necessity to change here. And I know that's not the test, as well as the general scheme and removing the existing E9 as well.
Thank you. Right. Yeah, I think no, covered everything you need to on that order. One side. And then we're on to the final order, which is number 3, which relates somewhat to number 4 in some ways. So this is the Perth and Kinross Council core path Luncati 121 and right of way stopping up and diversion number 3 order 2021. This involves stopping up and diverting a short section of path near the Red Gordon A9 crossing, I believe. For this, Mr. Godfrey stated initially that the proposed crossing of the A9 is not suitable. Cross-tailing route will increase the volume of traffic on the A9 as recognised in the environmental impact assessment report in the planning application. Noise would also increase as acknowledged, which would distract the attention of potential users. The crossing would not be suitable for all abilities, including the elderly, children, and anyone with mobility difficulties. So, from my point of view, these are matters that we covered in some detail in relation to order number 4. But then he goes on in his conclusion from his hearing statement. I maintain my objections to this order. It is clearly not part of the cross-Tay link road development. Access must be allowed to continue from the end of Luncati 121 to the bus stop adjacent to the north-bound A9 carriageway. There's nothing in the order that cannot be carried out by other means. Lack of maintenance of the footway and vegetation beside the A9 is more pressing. The Roads Authority has the power to carry out maintenance and improvements. The lane closure for such work is easily achieved. Lack of maintenance of Luncati 121 is also more pressing. The local authority has powers to undertake improvements. Stopping up and diversion orders should not be used to achieve what can be done by other means. In this case, what the Roads Authority and local authorities should be doing. Using an order over an area not affected by development would not be appropriate, and the order should be dismissed. He adds that the council should investigate possible incursion of the right of way in line with Section 46 of the Countryside Scotland Act 1967. So I think, his initial objections were sort of covered in some detail, and then sort of like to comment on his conclusions in his statement about the order and alternatives, I think he's trying to say, and maintenance issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if you want to
Yes.
contact again, and I can cover kind of the higher level stuff, and again, Sven can come in more detail. So yeah, I would, first of all, it probably wasn't his first point, but I would say the first point is that he's kind of alluding that this isn't part of the scheme. It's not required for the scheme, which I think we established yesterday when we were looking at the difference in level up at Red Gorton, that there's considerable difference in level between the existing ground and the section of the A9 that's been realigned. So the section of the A9 that we're realigning is getting pushed further west. Therefore, there's a big cutting on the west side. And I think Denise concluded yesterday there was something between 4 and 5 metres at the highest point. So there's categorically, I would say that's wrong. That assumption is part of the scheme. Part of the path won't be there and will need rebuilt essentially after that cutting comes through it. So when that cutting comes through it, then we've got a duty to look at the path and we're rebuilding it, and that's what we've done. And we've seen that it's not of a suitable gradient for all users, so we're looking at regrading it, and that's the reason it's going to snake down the cutting rather than come straight down the cutting. A more appropriate gradient with a different surface. The other points he's raised with regards to the increased traffic on the A9, I think once the developments build out that come on the back of CTLR, that we've not disputed that there is increases in traffic on the various roads as a result of developments. And he made reference to whether the crossing's suitable, but I'm not sure the crossing is kind of separate issue. I mean, this core path comes down to the edge of the A9. The crossing, obviously, people that use it will then potentially go on to use the crossing or not, whatever. They might jump on a bus. But I would say that's a separate point that he's trying to make. Nonetheless, to address the point, I would say that the crossing that we're leaving is to DMRB standard when currently it's substandard. So I can appreciate some people not liking the fact that a bridge hasn't been provided, etc., etc. But nevertheless, I would like to make the point that currently there's a substandard crossing there, and afterwards there will be a crossing in place that's designed to the design manual for roads and bridges, so it's a UK standard. For lack of maintenance, or kind of on behalf of the council, I would say, well, it's a core path, so it's through kind of private land. So I think in that path, in the instance, I think there is a bit overgrown. I actually met somebody on site there a couple of months ago, one of the residents, to look at it. And we've given an undertaking as part of the scheme. So even the section of path that we're not rebuilding, the section of path that's further remote from the scheme, we've given an undertaking that the contractor's going to look into that as a community benefit and go in there and actually improve and clear that section of path as well. So they're doing that over and above the scheme requirements. We're currently, the contractor's currently chatting with the landowners just now to make sure that we can get access to the land to do it officially. So I feel we're addressing that as well, separately.
So is that the short stretch between the end of the proposed new route, the loop, and the bridge? There's a short stretch, and
yes,
north.
It's from the part of Lunc to one that's been improved, so the bit that's snaking down the cutting. So from the new path, so that order section will be new path. So from there up towards Red Gorton, we're going to look to clear all the bushes and scrape that out and widen it, because I think over the years it has been. The bushes have been creeping over there, and it has been getting narrowed over the years. So
Ross, I think that's where 121 meets 114 is a stretch you're talking up to.
Right.
Yeah, between those 2 points, yeah. So we're looking at clearing that out and just doing a bit of basic maintenance and widening it out. But yeah, so that'll be done. That'll be over and above what you've got in the planning application and what's been put before you currently.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to comment? Mr. Stokes, comments at all, or on the maintenance issues, or are you happy?
I wasn't going to. I could just say that this isn't a path that the council currently routinely maintains. We have powers to maintain because it's a core path. It's not one that we do. It's not on our land. But for Green Space, I suppose we welcome Mr. Fletcher's initiative in giving it a clear now as a sort of an associated task with the wider project.
Okay. Right.
It's like
sorry.
I was just going to sort of back up what Ross was saying in terms of the need for the order and the diversion due to the earthworks cutting into the existing ground. and removing the existing path there at the end of Lunc 124. So to achieve the standard required by Roads for All and Cycling by Design of a gradient that's less than 5%, then that's what we have to do, is to realign the path and snake it to increase the length in order to provide that capacity or that scope to flatten it out.
Okay. Mr. Elliott, you.
Sorry, yes, interrupted there. I'm not entirely sure from reading Mr. Godfrey's hearing statement, but it appears to be he's disputing where the right of way goes to. All I can say is that even before that hearing statement, it was something we did look at, because of course there's an element of doubt because the A9 was dual and it's not clear exactly where the right of way went. It seems to have gone down southwards. I can say that I've seen the original road stopping up order was for Tayside Regional Council one from 1982. Unfortunately, it's very indistinct, but it does show the curve coming down to what seems to be the new A9. And the best I can say is the order plan before you, we consider that to be correct as to what the element is being stopped up, and of course the diversion.
Well, again, I think you covered everything on that for me. Yeah. So, unless there's anything else on that particular order from anybody? If not, I'll put that to one side, and that sort of completes my sort of questions about those three orders. And Mr. Elliott, I think you had something generally to say about the orders.
It was to pick up on a point that you asked me yesterday, but actually affects all orders, not just Lunc 124, and you were asking me about what if the order was refused, and obviously I gave an answer. What I should have done is pointed out there is actually something much more eloquent than I said yesterday and more detailed. In the report of handling, the planning report to handling, if I could direct you to paragraphs 155 to 161, and that's on the economic and social impacts. But there's also other paragraphs that link to that, which are 167 to 175, which is the recommendations and conclusions. And that, if you like, sets out the worst case scenario on CTLR itself. But also you can, frankly, as someone who gives planning advice, the one that gives me the shivers is LDP that doesn't have its requisite land supply. And you'll probably understand as to why I'm saying that, as to the huge unknown implications if you don't have your land supply there and whatever could happen. But of course, those paragraphs can also be turned round on their head as to the positive aspects that CTLR is bringing. And back to what I said previously yesterday, I think it was as well, the overall benefits of CTLR. It's not just simply the air quality in Perth and the traffic management in Perth. There's much wider implications to do with lots of housing in the area. In fact, I'm aware that in Perth and Kinross itself, the vast majority of housing is to be to the west of Perth, in and around the areas that I'm talking about. So it is critical infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you intend writing in at all on any points, or I mean, I'm happy with what we've gone through, and I've got all the documentation. It's whether you feel you want to add anything.
If I could leave it this way, I had a discussion with my colleagues yesterday. What we will do is, when we're finished here, we will have a quick discussion. I know what my inclination is, but I want to confirm it with my colleagues. And then what I'll do is I'll email. I'm happy enough to say, well, I'll not commit myself. I think it's less likely. I think we've covered the issues, but I just want a word with my colleagues first of all before being 100% on that. And of course, if you've also said that there's Mr. Robertson's has sent in some documents we'll need to look at as well. So I'm not anticipating we'll be doing anything lengthy, and if we do anything, it will be quick.
Okay, right. From my point of view, this is one of the main cases I'm dealing with, so I will be giving it, some priority in terms of writing out the orders. So I hope there's not too much delay.
That's helpful that you raised that point, and be careful with my comments here. I appreciate you're a very busy man. And I also well know that once you've done your reports, then you don't control then the time the minister is going to take to actually deal with things. But just to say to you, we certainly would appreciate reports in early course, because I think we alluded to it, but the construction of CTLR itself is properly due to start, I think, Ross, on about the 12th of August or so. So
yeah, 12th of August is the current contract date for the main construction kicking off in the summer. Yeah. So again, like Colin says, we weren't intended to push too much, but we've got a project board that'll be asking questions because they'll be keen to know what's going on, you know. So
it's just that date as your main construction date to take place, 12th of August. Yeah. Okay, so unless there's anything else, I think we'll close the hearing, and thanks very much for your cooperation and much appreciated. It's very helpful for me in looking at this, which on the face of it, it's 4 separate orders, but it's all very much interlinked, as you say, from a network point of view and from development point of view. So thanks so much again. Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.